The goal of this podcast is to help you break in and thrive in advertising. And we do that every week by sharing the stories and advice of those rocking it on the other side. And welcome back to ADjunct, the segment where we listen to the best advice from the best advertising educators across the world. This week, we simulate what it's like to be an advertising student at the University of Colorado Boulder. And we learn directly from Diane Elliston. Diane is a teaching professor in advertising, public relations, and media design at CU Boulder. She's both highly conceptual and strategic, and she's got a little balance of it all with a touch of quirkiness. And you can tell from this conversation that she knows how to separate all those and prepare her students to break in and thrive in advertising. With years of creative experience, including 5+ years working at Mattel, Barbie movie, remember that, Barbenheimer, if we all recall, she has found her love for helping students in the beautiful foothill mountains of Boulder. A few things I love about this conversation. So she teaches the intro course for ad students and the capstone. So that's the last class, meaning she welcomes students and helps them pick their path earlier in their academic career. Then later, 3 years later around there, she gets to see the students' exponential growth with the final capstone class, sending them off into the quote unquote real world after she guides them through the culminating real client class. Also, Diane gets the creative process. She demystifies this process and gives us tangible advice on how anyone in this field can develop a creative concept more effectively. Faster, I don't know about faster, but more effectively, probably. And the hint here, if you don't listen to the episode, you need to separate yourself from your damn cell phone. And Diane mentions our Crowbar Awards, in which one of her past students, Jamie Chuan, won the coveted Blue Crowbar in our Q1 brief with Greg Hahn. It's our ongoing creative competition. We have a new brief live all year round with a new creative challenge and guest judge to pick the best of the best. You can enter the show now. You can see the current brief and judge for a chance to win the Crowbar Award and come on the podcast too if you win. You can do that all by visiting www.crowbarawards.com. Now on with the show. This is the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast Adjunct Edition. And as usual, I'm your accomplice, Gino Schellenberger. Kick it, Mikey. All right. Diane Elliston, welcome back to the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast. This is our take 2. There were some thunderstorms, I believe, in Boulder, Colorado. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. We've had a crazy summer this year. Lots and lots of rain, lots of little mini flash floods going down the street, and quite a few power outages. So,
Okay. Fingers
yeah.
crossed everybody's safe first and foremost and that your power doesn't go off. And then we'll start the recording. So, Diane, you are an instructor.
Mhm.
You're a university instructor at one of the best schools probably in the world. It's beautiful.
I
University of
think so.
Colorado Boulder.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I love it there. It is beautiful. It is the quintessential college campus, I
Oh,
think. It's what I imagined college would be when I was in high school.
where did you go?
I went to a couple places. I went to Cal Poly right out of high school.
Oh, nice.
Uh-huh. I was an architecture major
Wow.
for just about 2.5 years. And then I decided to go to SciArc, which was more of a kind of, um, how do I put this? It was a more conceptual program, more design based than what I was doing at Cal Poly, although Cal Poly is an amazing school. And sometimes I wonder if I should have just kept with it. Um, and so I went to SciArc and then entered the fine art world.
Got
As
it.
it
I
turns
guess you
out,
kind of
that was me.
architecture.
Hmm.
Architecture has that design background to it, backbone. A lot of math too, right?
Yeah, a lot of math.
Yeah. I
definitely.
maybe we'll start a breaking and entering architecture podcast one day. But for
Oh,
now,
you can go forever.
okay, it's good to know. So you then got into design, and
Hmm.
then and fast forward to today, which I want to get into your background, but just to give everybody a little
Sure.
bit more context, I know the intro will also include it. So you teach. So what do you teach? You teach advertising at
I do.
University of Colorado Boulder. Where what are you teaching today? You told me just before we started recording that you just picked up a class for the fall,
Hmm.
which is coming up, right? That's like in like a week,
Yeah, it's
two
in two
weeks.
weeks. I'm super excited. There was an opportunity, there was an opening for a story design one class. So I will be teaching that along with a capstone course, design for social innovation, which is kind of just a really fun elective, and then the intro to advertising class, which is a lecture
Hmm.
for all interested parties in the advertising or PR majors. They have to take that class in order to get to the next group of
Right,
classes. So
right.
yeah.
So we'll get into that. So we'll talk a
Mhm.
little bit about Boulder's ad program, your specific classes. I love how you teach the intro and also the capstone, which is usually 99.99% of the time one of the last classes these advertising majors take. Is that
Mhm.
correct in this case scenario?
100%. It is usually, it's preferable that they take it within the last year that they're going to be
Hmm.
there. Sometimes I get people who are first semester seniors,
Yeah. Yep.
but most of the time they're second semester seniors. And sometimes I even get them after they've walked in the summer. And I have
Mm,
to remind them that
they still got to pass.
they still have to show up and do the class. So, yeah.
Right. But I love that because it's a combined class, right? The intro, it's like add NPR, or am I
Yes.
getting that confused with somebody else?
No, that is it. I am co-teaching that course with Dr. Fisher. She will teach the PR portion for
Hmm.
8 weeks, and I teach the advertising portion. And we run two classes simultaneously, and we switch at the
Nice.
mid at like 8 weeks or so.
Yeah.
So
So they want in. Are they all majors? Or are they like exploratory? Like, could they be in other majors or undecided?
yeah,
Is that like they're like a requirement that they can take to potentially lead them into the major?
yes, it's a required class if they want to continue in the major.
Sure.
But I think I don't know all the university policies about it, but I
Sure.
think it covers,
Some sort of
probably some
requirement.
humanities elective or something.
Right.
Yeah.
So but that we see where I went to school, it was the case where like 2/3, I don't know if that's accurate. That was like 2016. But like 2/3 of the majors for advertising like transferred in. So
Hmm.
they'll put like their really animated, like persuasive, inspiring instructors to teach that first level class to as a recruiting tool. So that says a lot about you and your passion for this business, and that you probably know a lot about this business as well to have you leading that first class. Is that the case where it is kind of like a recruiting tool to get majors in and transfer in?
I think so. I agree with that. I definitely feel like I need to really bring my biggest personality to that course, especially when we have it at 8 a.m.
Nice.
That is rough. So I do feel a little bit, song and dancey up
You have
there.
to. You have to.
But I've worn so many hats in this industry that
Right.
it really is. It's actually super fun for me. I really enjoy it. And I enjoy getting the students to understand that, advertising is not that this is a just thing, but it's not only copywriting and art direction and creative direction. There are so many pieces to the puzzle to get a project from beginning to end and out the door, that there's room for everyone if they're interested and excited about it. There's so many
Yeah.
different things you can do in advertising. It's really
And
big field.
and I think it's so important to have somebody, and I talk a lot with other professors about this. I think it's a good balance that it's a good sign that the institution has a balance between your PhDs, your tenure track,
Mhm.
those that do research predominantly in their um in academia. And then on the flip of it is that you have those people that are instructors, professors of practice, lecturers, whatever you want to call them. They come from industry experience. And I think it's really strategic on their part and really smart and planned out probably to have you so as a lecturer or as that instructor role who has that background experience in the agency, in the quote unquote real world,
Hmm.
as we like to say, teaching that intro course, because then you can speak on the different roles like we just talked about. You can inspire, you can draw case studies that you've done, seen, been a part of. I think that's so critical, especially for that recruiting and inspiration point of it.
Yeah, I agree. I 100% agree with you. I think being from industry, you know, yes, there's a place for the doctorates and the PhDs and the people who write the books, definitely. But having for some of the courses, especially the ones where we're talking about the nuts and bolts and ins and outs of advertising, I
Yeah.
think it's very helpful to have that industry experience because we definitely have a perspective that's unique.
So I'm curious then, how do you stay fresh and stay in tune with the constant changing trends of the industry? Do you have passion projects? Are you working on the side? Are you
Mhm.
consulting? What do you do to really, keep those case studies up to date for those students?
Yeah, definitely. Well, no, first and foremost, I have a massive inbox that just, is constantly delivering me the latest and greatest ad programs and PR campaigns, marketing initiatives, rebrands, everything. I'm looking at that stuff on a day-to-day
Are these like
basis.
newsletters or
Mhm.
people sending them like I'm sure past alum, like people you had in your class are keeping you updated. They're proud of their work and you probably were foundational into getting to that role. So how are you consuming these? Like what's your system to stay like to get these in your inbox?
Yeah, I do subscribe to quite a few
Mhm.
newsletters, Ad Week, Ad Age.
Marketing Brew is
Um,
a good one.
Yeah, and I like to just go. I'm constantly trying to find new projects for students to work on too, new impetus like for my practical classes.
Mhm.
I'm just out looking around and seeing what people are currently doing, but also students do come back to me and share their work, which is like
That's awesome.
that's my favorite. I had a student get written up like 2 weeks ago in an Ad Age article for some social media work that she did,
Mhm.
and it was such a thrill. And I saw it and pinged her on LinkedIn and called it out, and then we talked about it, and it turned into such a great conversation that now her company that she works for, I'll give them a shout out, Olipop, delicious
Yep.
sodas.
Yep.
Um, they are going to be a capstone client, and then she brought me another client for spring. So it's just, I try to keep in touch with everybody. I mean, obviously, there's only so many hours in the day, and I,
Right. Right.
have to make time for family and things like that. But I'm pretty voracious. I start my morning out with the newspaper and try and whenever I have a little downtime, just, checking out what's happening in the world. So I
I
try to
like
keep
that.
up. Hmm. There's a
And
lot
I
to see.
and that's a good lesson in general for everybody like listening to this podcast. You need to be as voracious as Diane is every single day, especially if you're trying to get your first job. Like, it's so critical to know who's getting like new pieces of business because, like,
Hmm.
right, those people are hiring. Who lost business? Because if you're spending all of your energy networking with a company, let's say you're second semester senior and you're networking with a company that just lost their biggest piece of business. Let's say Wyden Kennedy loses Nike. This is hypothetical because Havas Chicago stole it. Dream
Uh,
world. Dream world. Didn't happen. Maybe one day. I'll probably get fired for that. But
I
you don't want to
don't-
spend your time, networking with a company that loses their big client because they're not hiring, right? So these are
right.
little tools, little tricks to know about. So staying in tune with that. I also recommend like Tim Nudd, and he's like the creativity editor at Age. Go on Twitter or X and then subscribe to him. And then to put on turn on post notifications because every time he tweets, he's like breaking news, and you get boom right to your right to your phone screen. So that's another little PR trick that helps everybody too.
Yeah, the notifications can be annoying, but they can also be really helpful. I sometimes turn them off
Yeah.
depending on how busy I am. And I'll be honest with you, this week, getting added to another course, I
Yeah.
have I've kind of, turned some things down on
You
my
have to.
radar this week. I have to do that. And you have to do that. Like, I don't want, people to feel like it's got to be hitting you 100% every
No.
day.
Yeah.
M- You know, have the presence of mind to, you know, um
Turn off.
yeah, have some boundaries,
Yep. Yep. You're right. You're absolutely right. And I feel the same way. It is nice though, like if you can subtly include a little bit of knowledge into your daily like socials. For example, like follow maybe one like TikTok, like stuff about advertising.
hmm
Ashley was on this podcast. She has a great TikTok. Follow it. Your algorithm is going to stay the same, but every once in a while you'll get one of her videos that are super
right.
helpful. So that's always good. And then you can, if you're tired, you can mute it.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And being, I do have accounts on all the socials. I'm not
Mhm.
personally, I don't put a lot of stuff out there, but I like
No,
to have it so
to
I can see
consume.
what people do. Exactly. And well, I like to see what people are doing, what's popular. Oh, I love the Pop Tarts TikTok. It was a
Mm,
few months ago for the banana bread Pop Tart cardigan. Did you
okay.
see it? It's
No.
wonderful. It's so great.
The
Lots
what
of
was
earned
it?
media.
The Pop Tart banana bread cardigan, you said?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. An influencer crocheted a cardigan and then they sold X number of them for, a very reasonable amount. But the fun thing that happened was all the ones that were purchased, because there was a limited edition,
Hmm.
got resold for hundreds of dollars.
Yeah. Those
So
limited
that was
time
cool.
offers are huge. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really exciting space, actually. I think it's really interesting. And the way they aligned with the influencer was brilliant because they tapped into the whole idea of grandma culture, grandma crafting. But this is a very young person who is a really brilliant crochet artist. And so they have a huge following. It's such a well executed campaign. They also made the pattern available to people, so
Hmm.
I could say, hey Gino, come over, we're gonna have wine and cheese and crochet and we're gonna make cardigans. And
Wow.
I could have
I'd be
10
over
friends,
I'd be over instantly.
and we would have so much fun. So this idea of having legs,
Hmm.
those kinds of campaigns are the ones that jazz me, and I like to share them with the students so they can see it doesn't have to just be a one-off. It can
Hmm.
snowball into something, and you can sort of plan for it.
Right.
One-offs are fine too,
Yeah.
if it's a timely thing like the Oreo thing at the Super Bowl, or some of those other the Chick-fil-A, and what was the other one with the chicken, Popeyes and Chick-fil-A on the now X, the former Twitter.
What'd they
uh,
do? To go at it?
they kind of went head to head.
Mm.
It was pretty good, very strategic.
Interesting. I'll have to check that out. I try, I get a little burnt out, like scanning it all the time. Like I
I
don't even
know,
care. I'm
there's a
actually,
lot.
I'm actually kind of at a point where I'm like, that's all of it kind of seems stupid after a while. It's like I was talking with one of my coworkers, and I'm like, I was, what do for my master's program? I'm like, what are your three favorite brands?
Hmm.
He's a new business, and he looked at me. He's like, I don't like any brands. I don't like any brands.
Oh, jaded.
And it was joking around because it was early in the morning before
Mhm.
coffee. We were all in today, and I'm like, you know what? Me too. Actually, I don't really like. It's like when you work in an ice cream shop for so long, and all you do
Yes,
is eat the ice cream.
you get burnt on the
Yeah,
ice
yeah.
cream for sure.
But taking a step back is super important, those boundaries and realizing that. So I'm glad you brought that up. And I'm glad that
Hmm.
you shared a little insight, like how you stay relevant and you stay in tune with the trends. It's so, so important, especially for those instructor roles, right?
Hmm.
That's what the value bring. Touching upon your past experience is also relevant too. So let's go into this. How did you, so you kind of alluded to it with transferring out of architecture, transferring
Hmm.
to what was the school called?
Oh, SciArc. That
SciArc.
is that is an
Where is that?
architecture program. It's in Southern California.
Okay,
Yep.
nice. Cool.
Yes.
So you wait, so you transferred to another architecture program?
So I went there, and then I did kind of a sideways move and
Yeah.
changed majors to fine art,
Oh, okay.
photography and sculpture, and
Yeah.
played
So
around in that
BFA.
world. I have a BFA and an MFA. I do not have a degree in advertising.
Okay. That's
Shocking.
almost more interesting. Like that's a whole other podcast. But anyways, um, so you got the BFA,
I got the BFA.
and then what? How did you break into all this nonsense, fun
It's
stuff?
so weird. It is the strangest story. I don't know if you have. I'll try and I'll summarize quickly.
Hmm.
After my master's, which was also in fine art, I moved to New York because I was going to
Did you
be.
go right after your bachelor's, like straight into the
I
master's?
think I took a year,
Okay,
you know,
sure.
just finances and stuff.
Hmm.
But I moved to New York City thinking I was going to be, this famous conceptual artist doing art installations, and all the galleries were just going to come running and throw me money. And
Sure.
um, I honestly went there with like $1,000. I had no money with me. I was so naive. And I ended up getting, bouncing around a couple jobs. I worked for a digital agency, one of the first digital agencies. It was called Oculus. I remember that there was, I feel like it might have been Barnes and Noble, or one of the book accounts was their big account. So they were doing what interactive websites for them, and I was just a coordinator. I didn't program or anything, but we did some conceptual charrettes, and that was pretty exciting.
What's a
And it,
charrette?
like a weekend brainstorm
Oh,
for
okay.
new innovative ideas.
Got it. Like
So
a
we did some of
sprint.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, kind of like your Crowbar Awards. So we participated in those things. I really loved it. I ended up working for um, a fine art person, Rachel Whiteread, who had a big project going on in Soho. And I was one of the minions helping her realize her vision. And after that, I ended up moving back to Los Angeles, and I had a contact from a scene shop where I worked to work in the trade show group at Mattel Toys.
Barbie movie.
Totally. Yes. Do you want to talk about Barbie right now?
Yeah.
I I wore so many hats at Mattel. I was a producer. I did graphic design. I was the catalog art director for the catalog.
Nice.
Um, yeah, trade
What other
shows.
brands do they have under Mattel?
Oh my gosh, I worked mostly on Hot Wheels and Matchbox
Yeah, I heard
and
they're
some
planning out like a
Polly
bunch of different
Pocket.
movies now.
Oh, they're an entertainment company. It's
Hmm.
really
Smart.
interesting. Yeah, I love the sets for the Barbie movie though.
I haven't seen it yet.
I
We
haven't
do
seen
this
the movie. I've
podcast.
just seen the trailer, and I've seen
Okay, good.
this Architectural Digest did a full walkthrough with Margot Robbie for the sets, and I just love how they kind of mix and mash up, the pretend world of Barbie with a real world. I think it's brilliant. It's so fun.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, check it out. So yeah, so I worked for Mattel for 8.5 years, doing
Wow.
lots of different things. Yeah.
So was any of that on like I'm sorry, but like you might have said this. So was this any of this marketing related, or what were you doing exactly? Like how would you
Yeah,
bucket that time?
it's interesting. So towards the end of my time there, before my family and I moved to Boulder, I worked in their corporate marketing group as a producer, print producer.
Gotcha.
So managing those projects, making sure they get completed on time, on budget, all of that fun
How did you
things.
like that transition? I guess, from your initial goal of moving to New York and wanting the galleries and being more conceptual art. How did you evolve, I guess, and how did you feel about the transition being like to making stuff happen, right? And just executing and being a
Mhm.
part of that process. Was it a natural transition? Did you have to learn? Did you have to let go? Did you still get fulfilled creatively?
All of those things and more. So um, being a conceptual, so architecture is a very conceptual practice where I started. Sure, you can design a house, right? You could design the house that I live in, which is not a very exciting design. It's a 1970s track house. But if you're trying to think bigger or, further, and creating environments for human beings to actually interact in and thrive in, it could be a much different experience. And so that part of architecture was the part that I really loved. Um, monuments, things like that, um, public spaces, places where people interact with each other and their environment. So that kind of translates to conceptual art. And I was making a lot of installation type art. It was the 90s, I'm not going to lie. So, um, things that were reliant on the space where they were,
Yeah.
and the people that would interact with them. So
Yeah.
that kind of thinking is problem solving too, because I might have an idea for a sculpture or an installation, and then I get to the site that I've never seen before and I have to redesign everything because it's completely not working. So
Right.
there's nothing really different intrinsically about
Hmm.
that and an advertising campaign, because
Yeah.
you have got to be able to pivot and be flexible when there's going to be wrenches, thrown into the process. Even the smallest little project, it could be a merch project. I'm experiencing that right now with a little side project that our CU Ad Club is working on, where
Hmm.
just the simplest little thing, you don't really think that it's going to be having many issues. And then there are, 5 different things that have to change before it can be art release. So
Yeah.
it's just, you
There's
just have,
always this
yeah,
creative problem solving, and yeah, it kind of itches
exactly.
the same scratch, I guess.
Yeah. And sometimes there's a choice, right? Sometimes you can offer up a client, 2 options that solve their dilemma, that you can live with. And sometimes you can offer them 3, and one of them you don't really want to live with, but
Yeah.
they're in love with. And
Yeah.
sometimes, I hate to say it, but that one might win. And if
Yeah.
you die on your sword every single time, burnout will happen.
Hmm.
And so that's one of the things I want my students to take away is, you know, this is a client driven business, and you want to give them the biggest, best ideas that you have. You don't want to be wallpaper, to quote my friend Ethan Decker. Don't be wallpaper, bring it. However, sometimes your big idea is not well received. And how are you going to save your project? How are you going to make your client happy? How are you not going to get fired from the account? There's a lot of things that have to happen, and there's negotiations and diplomacy, all of these skills that you don't really think about when you think of advertising, right? They all have to go into that mix, and there's
I love
strong
it.
personalities, and you know
Hmm.
so that's why, a great account management team, a great strategy team that works with the creative team, everybody's all, kind of flexing and bending to try and get the best work forward and convince that client that this is going to be really good for them.
Right. Yeah, it's always a battle of servicing, like just getting like agencies are always battling like servicing, like meeting what the client wants, getting the paycheck and like keeping the company afloat
Hmm.
versus pushing them. And, you know, great agencies are always pushing and trying to push the best work possible. But sometimes it's not the case, right? Like sometimes you have a financial client or a big bank or healthcare, and those specific clients are super necessary,
Yeah,
right?
and they can be
And
more conservative.
yeah, and I like this quote from Leo Burnett. It's like when you reach for the stars, you might not quite get one, but you won't come up with a handful of mud either. So the bigger the idea you present internally as a junior,
Hmm.
then they can perhaps pull something from that huge, crazy creative idea that might actually work. It might not be what you envision, but there might be a nugget within there that can absolutely manifest, maybe on a smaller level or maybe in just a different direction.
Yeah, completely. That's why I think our CU capstone program is, I'm going to transition here,
Do it.
is so effective for the students, because a lot of times they haven't had the opportunity to work with a real client,
Mhm.
and the real clients come with asks, right? Depends on what it is. If they come in and say, we just want a new website, I usually push back and say, well, we're going to give you a campaign.
That's
you
good
know
that you're kind of like the chief creative officer in a way. Like you're already setting the expectations like beforehand, like you're like the CCO and like the managing director in a way, like in the fact that you've already set the tone by
Hmm.
like picking a client that you know is already going to be receptive of big ideas, and that's like half the battle, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
or not half the battle. I guess it's just like really helpful, right? Just from the beginning, like they are coming in looking for big ideas. So now students, and regardless, even if a client that you bring in is doesn't love the idea, who like you can mess around, you can take risks. You're not
Sure.
getting there's no paycheck, there's no getting fired, right? Like
Exactly.
it's going to help your portfolio to have a big idea, and yeah, why not take those big shots while you can, while you're still a student?
Exactly. I always tell them, don't make it so safe in the beginning, especially, Sure, maybe after you present it for your pitch, maybe your concept isn't well received, or maybe you missed the target audience, or
Well, that's
um,
the problem. I feel like
yeah.
how I would probably grade this is like, did you did you have a strategy? Did you follow that strategy? Did you have like a niche audience that you selected?
Hmm.
And like, did you try and did you attempt to speak to that specific audience?
Yeah. I
What
mean,
are your takes like on that?
they have to do a lot of research in the
Mm.
upfront of that class to figure out exactly who they are talking to.
Yeah.
Um, and they do some comparative analysis with challenger brands.
Hmm.
They also do benchmark analysis. All of that feeds into their positioning and
Hmm.
their pitch.
Yeah.
They write their own brief, but
Nice.
sometimes I had this one, I remember it was a summer course, and the client was I Have a Dream Foundation of Boulder, and the team had this wonderful idea. It was all about growth and blooming and, thriving, but they were really not focusing on people. It really did sound like plants. And the
Okay.
client just came back and said, "Hey, I love some of these concepts. However, don't forget that this is all supposed to be targeted around children and families."
Right.
And the team was like deer in the
Oh yeah.
headlights. They were like, "Oh, our ideas." I'm going to tell you that we had a little meeting, a little side meeting afterwards, and we talked. And I said, "Look, you guys, you have a lot of great ideas here. You just need to tweak the language. Go back and look at the language and make it apply to human beings." And they did. And then they sent their pitch deck off to the client who loved it. They came back with the strongest final um, creative execution of that semester, and it was amazing and beautiful and so well done. It was
Nice.
outstanding, like
They took
A plus plus.
great. They didn't give up. You helped
No.
them with their feedback. Like they got the feedback, they applied it, and they made it better. Like that
Yeah, I
that
see that as
itself.
the biggest problem is students don't love, I mean, nobody loves critique, right?
Oh,
It's
it's probably the biggest problem that I see with interns. And when I worked at a portfolio school,
Mhm.
one of like the first things that you have to kind of teach creatives, really anybody, but especially creatives. And I had this conversation like day one with my two interns. I go, you have to separate yourself from the idea, right? It's not a reflection of who you are. You should be able to come up with a bunch of ideas. You shouldn't be married to it. You shouldn't be like obsessed about it. You should have this attitude of resilience,
Mhm.
and that you can bounce, you can, and then push back at me. If you really want to fight for it, push back and give me a POV why, and we'll have a
Yeah,
conversation. But for the most part, it's like people get so like emotionally attached to them, and then it's like
mhm.
their first or second idea.
I know. That's why I always try to push them to have a lot of ideas.
Exactly. And that you're doing it absolutely right then, because that will help
Yeah.
them in the agency world,
So,
because that's what we want. We want to see volume, and it's tough. I mean, like agencies want to see both quantity and quality. That's
yeah.
just what the standards get higher and higher every single year. And it is very difficult for
I
sure.
think the hardest thing, well, it's not the hardest, but another difficulty to teach this concept of, it's not the tactic, right? It's not, oh, we're going to make a catalog, or oh, we're going to make this special coffee table book, or we're going to have an event, or whatever that
Yeah.
is. It's how you present it and how you talk about it and how you get people excited about it and what is the message, not what is the thing. And
Hmm.
that is, that's the one of the bigger challenges that I see a lot is, students will run off in 20 different directions and they'll have like, we have this and we have this thing and we have this thing and we have this thing. And I'm always trying to, come on, guys, let's bring it. How does it all relate? How does it work together? And is
Yeah.
this the best idea to push your concept, this item that you're creating or this event that you're doing? Is it in the right location? Is it going to be appealing to the correct group? That kind of, those kinds of things are learned with experience. And so that's why I feel like we're very lucky to have these great companies that are willing to work with us. We have some amazing companies this fall. I can't wait. I'm so excited.
I think a good remedy to that is just having one slide or one piece of paper where it states the background, the insight, and the idea.
Yeah.
Having those three components and then maybe one overarching visual prevents people from thinking tactically.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. Like we go, oh, we should definitely do a concert at Red Rocks. Okay. Let's take a step back. What's the insight here? Like what's the focus? Like what's the truth that we've uncovered about this, our target audience, this universal truth that we can pivot towards and then come up with a larger idea first.
Yeah. And
That's
we make
just,
them do that.
Absolutely.
We make them have, before they start conceptualizing what exactly the campaign truly looks like, we make them have that message, who their audience is, you know, and all of those things and what their goals are, and clearly state all of that. So it's definitely helpful.
And then you get in the fun part.
Yeah,
right.
definitely.
Like once you have a big idea, like we want to create the most interesting man in the world to appeal to 20 to 30-year-old males who drink beer at bars. The insight there was that men were afraid of being perceived as boring. So they said the big idea for Dos Equis was, we'll make like a character, like we want to make something that make these young adults or target audience feel like they're important. So they just went in like, most interesting man in the world, and then you can come up with all these interesting stories, right? About like what this most interesting man in the world did. And that's why that campaign, it started off with that insight and a big idea, and then you can come up with the fun stuff and activations and fun bar events or whatever it is, and then you can get tactful and come up with touch points and experiential planning, and that's where all the nitty gritty, like that's really fun when you can connect the dots too.
Yeah, I love that too. So that
and it's great that you teach your students, and I'm just like that's why we do this podcast, because not everybody has great instructors like you, and they don't go to Boulder, or they don't go to school at all, or maybe they just found out about advertising their senior year. So I am curious, like what other general advice do you teach your students to make them successful, right? When they call you back, they're obviously talking about great campaigns at great agencies or great companies. So you're doing something right. I guess, like, what are some of these other messages that you want to get across to our listeners who might not be as fortunate?
Right. Well, I mean, I think I kind of touched on this in the beginning. I did not come to advertising in a straight line either. So be curious, follow through. Don't be afraid. Trying does not hurt anything, right? One of the biggest problems that people trying to break into advertising, and students especially have, and creatives specifically, is that we get a lot of ideas, right? I have so many ideas in my head, and I discard the ideas before I've even shared them, right? So
self-rejection.
Yeah. Maybe being more open to just getting things out of your head onto paper. Don't be afraid to doodle and have a note. I carry notebooks around. Actually, there's notebooks all over my house, all over my car, all over my office.
Everywhere.
They're everywhere. I decided this year I'm going to get an actual class planner with dividers, like old school, like my kids have, so that I constantly have that one with me, because I just have stuff everywhere where I have ideas written down for different projects, or even my own creative projects, things like that. But get it out of your head, put it on paper, don't edit right away, and give yourself time to process. So exposing yourself to lots of different brainstorming techniques, talking with other people. You don't have to do this alone either. It's definitely, it can be a group activity. Yeah. And then you can go back on your own and think about it. But if you're constantly on your phone playing Wordle or crossword or, listening to the murder podcasts or what, not that I hate them because I listen to them too. I listen to so many podcasts, but sometimes I just put on classical music because there's no words or jazz, and it allows me to kind of let all this unravel, and I will make connections that don't seem to be connected previously, and that's where some of the really best creative stuff can happen.
It's hard for students. I get it. Like
Well, you got to be
you got
on.
a bunch of classes,
Yeah,
they're involved. We tell them all the time to like, stay involved, be the president, and have a great portfolio. And there's a lot to do. So,
right.
but
There's only so many hours in a
right,
day.
and you need to allot time for your brain if you're a creative or any role really to rest, and that's where the subconscious kicks in, especially if you're tackling a big brief.
Yeah,
um, it's so important to the system that we read about, we talked about all the time is immerse heavy in the beginning
sure.
with do your research, have those crazy conversations, and then let it go. Like
Yep.
literally shut the computer, and that's like why shower moments or like shower thoughts are a thing, because it
Take a
hits you when
walk.
you least. Yeah, take a
Walk
walk.
around.
Boulder.
You live in a great city too. You can walk around
For now,
Chicago.
until it gets cold.
Yeah, I know it gets cold here too.
Yeah, but it's like nice cold. The sun's still out.
I don't know. I've done
Beautiful.
face plants on the ice here before, so
Oh, that's not good.
it can be, yeah, it can be all of that. But
I love that
yes,
advice.
take the allow. Here's the thing. It's really, really hard to be creative on demand, right? Like if I look at you and I go, Gino, 5 great ideas, go. You're going to be like, ugh, right? So allowing yourself to, even if you have a 72-hour, creative block for your first round, make sure you schedule some I'm not doing anything time into that, even if it's like 15-minute bursts where you can just, be quiet in yourself. People aren't scheduling meetings during that time. That's one of the challenges at agency work is I used to block out working time, and that didn't necessarily mean I'd be sitting at my desk. I might be doing store visits, I go to fabric stores sometimes just to look at colors and textures and things. I go to retail, I just walk around, go outside, have a cup of coffee and doodle and just sort of decompress to allow some of those things to happen. But usually they happen when I'm not trying, like,
But still, it's like you
the
still
shower
settle
time.
down. Yeah, but
Yeah.
like even if you allow your brain to rest,
Mhm.
it could probably. I'm not like Huberman or a psychologist or
Yeah.
or ophthalmologist or whatever, but yeah,
You're not
it's.
an eye doctor.
I'm not an eye doctor. Vision plays a big role in like your brain as well, so that kind of
Hmm.
works. I don't know what I'm talking about, but yeah, I totally agree. I don't do this, so I'm like yeah. I don't do this personally. I
Yeah,
need
I
to.
know. Well, we all get stuck, right? So there are ways to help yourself get unstuck.
Yeah, I just always thought like stay busy, just keep on working, and then go to sleep, and then but good ideas will never like. I sat in my basement in the pandemic. That's how like podcast idea came.
I love this podcast idea.
Thanks.
I just watched a lot of Netflix and knitted about 30 hats.
Well, I got tired of watching Tiger King, and I
I
was like, all
know.
right, I'm done with this. And then I was like sitting on my couch alone in the basement, and I didn't want to talk to my parents. I was tired of them at the moment.
Hmm.
You know.
Yes, as were my people. I think everyone in my family independently watched all of Netflix during the
Mhm.
pandemic. But we also
Everyone.
took a lot of hikes, so we were
Yeah.
we were
You guys
super
are
lucky here.
absolutely. Well, I got
Um,
to get over there and visit. And
yep, you're invited.
thanks. Awesome. Well, then, how can people reach out to you? We talked a lot of great advice, your story, and I'm sure there's other questions that people probably will want to transfer over. Avoid
Come
any
on
face
over.
plants. And how can they reach out to you?
They can email me at my CU email, which is my name, Diane, Diane, .Elliston with 2 L's and an O at the end at colorado.edu. And you can put it in your notes if you like. You have my email address.
Hmm.
They can also follow me on LinkedIn, although I'll be honest with you, I tend to be more of a LinkedIn observer than a poster.
That's okay.
Unless I have something to be really, I give shout outs when I see students doing, great work. One of my former students, Jamie Chuan, won a
Mhm.
crowbar recently.
Whoop whoop.
Um, Shout out to Crowbar Awards.
The
We're going to
blue
be doing
crowbar
those.
with Greg Hahn. That was the first
Yeah,
one, and they crushed it. So they got to go on and talk with Greg,
it's so
and
exciting.
they got their crowbars. So the winning group gets to go on and meet the guest judge. Right now, we got Eric Coleman. I'm not sure when this episode will go live, but we have crowbar like briefs every quarter, all the time. There's
Hmm.
always a brief going on.
So the
So
next
there's no
one's
excuse.
September. Is that right? September
So yes,
1st?
so it's about like the financial quarters right now, which advertising doesn't too follow unless you're an account or
Hmm.
finance within advertising. But yeah, so this next one is this current one's with Amtrak and Eric Coleman that ends September 30th of 2023, and then
Hmm.
we'll go October 1st with the new one
Okay.
till January 1st if I got my math correct.
I'm going to try and get a group of students to work on those.
You should.
Yeah.
And yeah, well, people go to Crowbar Awards, www.crowbarawards.com.
Okay. Well, I think either
Thanks for the
my
plug.
design class, my social innovation class, or the storytelling class, I'm going to try and get them
Yeah,
excited about crowbars.
it's great. If you have any questions, let me know. But thanks, Diane. I appreciate you. We will be in touch, and you did a great job.